Good afternoon, everyone. It's Louise here from Eleanor Grace. So, if you've watched the first part of this, and I would say do watch that first before you get started, this is the first part of the stitch along ready for Christmas to make some lovely little baubles like these for hanging on your tree. Or giving away as presents. I like to have a certain colour scheme which fits in with my home decor, but I'm going to make them in sort of the traditional Christmas colours this time, just so you can see the contrast a bit more than you can on these, which may not come up so clearly on the camera here. Now it's an absolutely horrible overcast day here, so I've set up a new lighting rigging sort of set that I've got. So bear with me because I have to see how this looks when I finish, just to see whether I've got the right settings. But we will make a start on the very basics. So if you remember from the pre-video that I did, we cut out a couple of cardboard pieces from cereal packets or whatever for the shapes of our piece that we're going to do. We were going to make them a little bit bigger than these, as you can see, because these were very, very, very fiddly. If you want to make them a bit smaller, do go ahead. What I've done is a 7.5 centimetre and a 4.5 centimetre, which is about 3 inches and about 1 3/4 inches. What I have noticed once I've cut them out, which you can see here, is that when you get one of the pieces and the middle on there, it's not quite in the same proportions as these. These are much smaller in the middle, and I quite like that you had a lot of space around here to cut. So trial and error really, but you might want to cut out some other smaller pieces as well to see whether that works. So I've done that here. I've got a selection of either ones that I've used for other projects. I've recycled all of this felt. Actually, I didn't go out and buy any more in the end because I found that I had lots of little offcuts. So I've done sort of some different sizes here. So that might be a bit more like what I'm looking for, or even smaller. And these sizes, we do get down to the titchy tiny here, is 2.5 centimetres and 2 centimetres. So that's about 1.25 inches and 3/4 of an inch, something like that. But it's up to you. Just draw around whatever you've got, whether it's a coin or it's the bottom of a or the outside of a glass, whatever works for you. As long as it's circular, it should be fine. And we will just try a variety, I think, just to see what works and what doesn't for us. So the first stage obviously is to have cut out your pieces, and as you can see I've got a bit of a mixture here from things that I've used before, which I thought I might use, some nice little pinks and a sort of soft grey and a sort of beige and yellows, as well as some Christmassy colours, red and a green there, and different colour greens as well, just to see what I like. So what you want to do, obviously, cut out 2 pieces for each of the outside of your piece. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit, and then you want 1 or even maybe 2 pieces for the inside, so you can have fun having a little play around, seeing what you like. These look a bit like, doing it like that, it looks a bit like the penny mats that I did earlier in the year, so you might want to have a look at that one as well. But for the purposes of this, I'm going to make a start with this dark green and putting on a light colour just to give it a bit of contrast. So I could go for red. I think I might go for this sort of beigey colour here. So if you have seen the penny mat video, it's not dissimilar to start off with. If you've got a piece in the middle that's big enough, then you can pop a pin in there, which is what I'm going to do. Let's just get a pin to keep that in place. And then you can start thinking about what you want to do. Now, the the purposes of this really is to attach these two pieces together first of all. That's the first thing you need to think about. In fact, in any of my slow stitching videos, you will see that's always the first thing, is to join the two pieces together. So if we have a look at some of the examples that I did before, this one is very teeny tiny, as you can see. I've used different stitches, and I think all of the stitches, or most of them, that I'm going to use are on my video. So if you're not confident with them, I won't go into them in great detail here. Do have a look at the videos. I'm going to use French knots quite a lot. I'm going to use fly stitch quite a lot. I'm going to use chain stitch quite a lot as well. And also we've got a good old running stitch, which is a nice, very simple one. And I might add in a few others as well, maybe a little bit of herringbone, a little bit of blanket stitch. So pretty much all of those have got videos, and anything that hasn't, I will go through to just give you the basics for these. So what I'm going to do is have a look at the centres here. So on this one, I've actually attached it with a number of French knots in the centre. Then I've gone around that with chain stitch, and around the edge, but not on the actual centerpiece, I've done a running stitch. On this one, again, I've done French knots in the center. They are very good for keeping things in place. I've done a blanket stitch around the edge, and then I've done single fly stitches around the edge, just dipping into the middle of the blanket stitch. I really like that look. I'm definitely going to copy some of these for the ones that I'm doing. And for this one, I've done seed stitch in the middle, but what I did is I did herringbone stitch first, so I knew how much space I had left for seed stitch. And if you haven't done seed stitch before, it's a very simple, it's just a lot of small running stitches, but all in different directions. You want to make sure that each one is going in a different direction, so more or less something like 45 or 90 degrees from the previous one. So that is seed stitch in the middle, herringbone. Then I've started off with some fly stitch and some French knots. And then looking at this one, I've done French knots again in the centre. I've done a little, that's a little blanket stitch there, but sort of couched in quite tight. And I've done a little zigzag stitch around the edge. It's not quite a herringbone. And then I've come out to fly stitch and some running stitch. So there's so many things you can do, and if you've got a stitch that you really like, say you love chain stitch like I've done around here, then use whatever stitches you want to use. You don't have to copy me, but if you want to do exactly the same, then please do feel free. So what I'll do is I'll put most of these out of the way so we're not getting confused, and then I'm just going to start on this one just to give you a starting place. The other thing to remember is if you're using one of the smaller centres, which would be the sort of 2 centimetre ones, you will find it hard to put a pin in them and keep them in place. And what you could do, and what you could do on this size as well, is instead of pinning it on, I think this is what I'm going to do actually, going to do a single stitch. Now I'm going to do it in a bright colour, and I'm just going to show you my threads briefly as well before we go any further. I've got all sorts of things from the cupboard, all sorts of things I've got bits of, whether it's a metallic thread. I've got some bright yellow gold linen here. I got some cotton perlé, which is my favourite, as you know, cotton perlé, and I've got some crochet cotton and some more crochet cotton. I've got this pink, which I don't know what it is. It's like a cotton a brode, something like that. And metallic gold, all sorts of things. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of red, I think, just to give a contrast. But you use whatever you've got in stock. If you've got quite a bit of embroidery floss, that's fine. The only thing I will say, embroidery floss is not, it doesn't have very good tensile strength, which means that when you are pulling it tight, which you are sometimes with these, it has a likelihood of snapping. If you can get hold of cotton perlé, or you can get some cotton a brode, or any sort of crochet cotton, anything that you can get, whether you can get it in your local charity or thrift store, you know, use up what you've got. If you want to use embroidery floss, that's absolutely fine, but just be aware that you can't put it under too much strain because it will not take it. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to have a nice contrast. I feel like if I've got a very pale centre, then I feel like I want to do something quite bright and dramatic. So I'm going to go for red. I've got this bright red, which is quite fine. It's quite thin. It's more like a cotton perlé 12, but it is just cotton. It's not a cotton perlé. It's just something I happen to have. So what you can do is two things. Either you could come up through the centre and do a very small stitch, go back down and secure it, and then you can play around with your whatever you're doing, and then at the end you could just unpick or cut off the knot of the bit of thread that you're using and get rid of it. I would say to use a contrast thread if you're going to do that. So if you were working in the middle, say in yellow here, do it in red, or vice versa, just so you know which knot you're snipping off if you want to keep your piece in place. Well, I'm going to start off with some French knots. So as you'll see on my video, which I'll do, you know, it does it in much more time, in much more technique. Let's come in a little bit. What I do is I put my needle flat, lift the end up slightly as if you were like lifting up a cannon ready to fire, and then just wrap. Now you can wrap as many times as you want. I tend to do, depending on the thickness, between 3 and 5, sometimes a little bit more. So this is quite fine, so I'm going to do 5. I pull back like I'm pulling back on the syringe plunger, and then I stab it through, and then should hopefully get a nice little knot. What I do also is, as the thread's going through normally, I will hold on to the knot so it keeps it in place. So I'm going to do another one of those. This needle I've got is a little bit too thick. You will find some felts are easier to work with than others. I have just got stuff from my stash, and some of it is acrylic, which is not always the best. Sometimes it's either too thick or it falls apart. But a good needle, you probably want something with a less bulky eye. I think I will probably switch later to an embroidery needle, a chenille needle, something with a slightly smaller end. So as you can see, I can just start filling that one with some French knots, and that will be the first stage. Sometimes they do look a little bit bulky. I think actually 5 is probably a little bit too much on here, so I'm going to go down to 4 with this thread because it's actually thicker than it appears, which is probably why I had a little bit of problem pulling it down. So I've got my thumb on top, and that just helps keep it in place. I could add a couple of leaves and make that like a little holly, couldn't I? So that's that one started, and what I'm going to do is sort of fill the center area with the stitches there, and then I'm going to attach the edge. I'm going to go around the edge. Now with this one, I think I'm probably going to replicate one of the stitches that I did before. So what I think I might do is a little zigzag stitch, so not quite a herringbone, but just a little diagonal stitch all around the edge, and then I might have a little bit of space in here just to do a little stitch, and just sometimes it's a bit organic as you go along. You realize that different things fit in with the space that you've got available. So that one is started, so I'm going to do a few more of these in the center, and then I'm going to go around the edge with a zigzag stitch just to attach these edges so it's not flapping around. And then I'm going to have a look at the space I've got in the center and decide what I'm going to put in there. So that one's started, and I'm going to move on to another one, and I'm going to change my needle at the same time. And this one, I think I might do a slightly bigger centre. What shall I do with red and white? I do like red and white. I'm going to just snip the edge off this bit because it's perfection is not a requirement here, but sometimes it is nice to have it looking like a perfect circle. I find them very hard to do actually, so don't worry if you've struggled getting a perfect circle. So I'm going to switch over to something with a slightly smaller head, which hopefully will make life a little bit easier. And I'm going to get some green, again going very Christmassy. And I usually cut off about 12 inch. If you work with anything more than that, it tends to start getting snagged, and it starts getting a bit difficult. However, sometimes that does mean that you might have to carry on. You know, you might have to get a slightly longer pieces when you're going around the edge, because obviously these circles that I'm using here are quite big, and they may use more than 12 inches of thread, or 30 centimetres. So I'm going to pop a pin in the middle while I have a think about this one. So I don't know, what do you think? And do please comment, you know, about any ideas that you would like to use. This time, because it's a larger circle, what I think I might do is start going around the edge. I think that'll make it easier. Sometimes it's hard to look at a blank space and sort of think, what am I going to do with that? But once you've put the first stitches in around the edge, then sometimes it becomes clearer what you can do next. So this one I'm going to do a simple chain stitch near to the edge, just to keep the two pieces together. So we start off there. So again, I've got there is a video on chain stitch. So you come up and you go in the same hole, then popping your needle through like that, and what you're trying to do is catch this thread. Okay, so when I pull that through, and apologies because I am left-handed, this might look a bit backwards. When I pull that through, as you can see, we've got a nice little chain stitch. You don't want to pull too tight because then it starts to shrink the stitch a little bit. Once you've got your first stitch, then you go back in almost the same hole, but when you're moving on to the second one, if you go straight back in that same hole, it'll unravel. So you just want to go in slightly above or slightly below where the stitch is there. So again, you're coming up through to about the size of the stitch you want to make, and you're making sure that this bit of thread gets wrapped. So then when you pull through, you've got a nice chain. So I'm going to continue going around with that. Chain stitch is a really lovely stitch. It's really it's fairly quick and quite simple to do, and it does look quite effective. One thing I did with this is I did this one in a variegated thread. As you can see, it makes it look like you've added in different colours all the way around, but it wasn't. It was all a variegated thread, so it's slightly cheating. And there we go. So I'm going to work my way round with that one, and then when I've gone all the way round, which I won't do in front of you because it'll look pretty boring, when I've gone all the way round, I will then look at the inside here. Now what is quite nice to do is to match up a single stitch, or a single fly stitch, or a single French knot or something underneath or in between each stitch. That looks quite nice, and I've used that to good effect on this one. As you can see, we've got these little fly stitches going in between we've got a little French knot, and then on the row inside that we've got a little running stitch. So the running stitch is sort of between the V's of the fly stitch. So you can do all sorts of variations. What I will do also is I will upload a little video of the 4 that I've done previously. I will just upload that separately as a sort of progress video, and then you can have a look at that, so you can see the stitches that I've done, and if you wanted to sort of follow something like that. But I think if you've got a little range of stitches in your arsenal, then you can work out where to go from there. So that's another one started. So I've got that, and now I'm going to try a white one. So let's have a look. What have I got? I do quite like a bright yellow, but that one is a little bit small and it's going to look a bit like a fried egg, isn't it? So I think I will possibly go for, let's go for red, actually. Oh no, I've done that on the last one. Let's go for a bright green. Okay, let's go for a bright green, and I might see what it looks like to put another colour on top. Quite like that, actually. So I might go for a bright green and a red centre. Something a bit different. So I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to do a dark green. I do like the bright green, but I think that looks nice. So again, I'm going to, in this case, I'm going to do a little stitch in the middle just to hook it in place. And I'm just using up a scrap of thread here that I've got. So if you've got any short lengths that are no good for sort of proper stitching, you might want to get them out and use them for this. So I'm going to do it in red because I know I'm not going to embroider over that in red because it's not going to be seen. So this is what I'm saying about anchoring your pieces in place. So just come up and go back down. There we go. That's a little stitch which you can take out or you can cover it up as you're stitching. Just going to tie that off, and then once I've done the stitching on this one, I'll come back and I'll just snip this end off and take that little stitch out if I haven't covered it. So I feel like I want something sort of metallic on here. I've got some metallic threads. Whether or not they're going to be any good, sometimes if you've ever worked with metallic threads, they can be a nightmare to deal with. I got a few little examples here. Some of these are easier than others. The rigid ones I find very hard, but if there are ones that you can split, then I think that makes it a little bit easier. So I'm going to have a look for a silver. I'm going to try one of these. This is a rigid one, but I'm going to snip a little bit off that and just see what it's like. Now, because that's definitely firmly anchored in place, I feel quite confident about going into that one. So with these embroidery, with these metallic threads, you do want you do want to use them carefully because they can get away from you. They can be quite difficult and a bit challenging to control, but the effect, especially if used sparingly, I think is really amazing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a very simple running stitch around the centre here in metallic, just to give it a little bit of pop. So I'm just going to run around there. So that's my first one. Oh, it does really show up on that red. And just go around the edge. So the added benefit is that this will now anchor it in place, and I could probably take out that little stitch. So just going to go around literally with a little running stitch, simple as anything. There are so many stitches that you can use. It's really, you know, up to you what you like and what, you know, what you're confident with. Yeah, it's getting a bit snagged at the back already. The trouble is it gets twisted as you go with these threads, so they look great, but they can be a bit challenging. And as you can see, my circle is a little bit skewy. Now again, I don't want to be a perfectionist, because I am a perfectionist, but I really try not to be. So you can some of the felts, you can stretch them out a little bit, but that one isn't giving anything. So I'm really not going to worry too much about it. I might just trim this edge here a little bit, just so it doesn't look quite so obviously different. But if you've seen any of my videos, you'll know what I say about perfection. It's not a requirement here. The idea of slow stitching is to enjoy your stitching and to not put yourself under pressure. I've already got an idea of what I'm going to do on the next stage. As I've started this, it's sort of, as I say, sometimes the things present themselves to you and you think, oh, I've got an idea. So I'll tell you what that is in a minute. Let's just finish this stitch. So that is all now nicely attached with a nice little running stitch. So as you can see, it has caught a bit on the back. I usually try and tidy that up a bit, but sometimes it just doesn't go all the way through. I could have split this one, but it's not one I'm familiar with. It's one that I was given little ends of from Mum, so I haven't used it before. It's trial and error, isn't it? If you've made enough of the blanks of all of these, then you can just have a play around. So there we go. And now while I'm there, I'm going to snip that little centre one, take that out, take that stitch out because it's no longer needed. There we go. And I've got my little thing there. So I'm going to snip this edge a little bit just to even things up somewhat. Doesn't really matter, but there you go. Now this lends itself to something I did in one of these, which I'm just going to find, which was here. It's a version of this, but I don't think it's exactly the same, which was these little fly stitches. And I quite like them in between things. I've actually done them, I've done a feather stitch here and then done a fly stitch afterwards. So those are both really good stitches. Feather stitch is my favourite stitch to use, full stop. I just love it. So I'm going to do one of those now. I might do a fly or I might do a feather. Got to have a little think. And what I tend to do is also work out what palette I'm going to work on. I tend to think on a small piece you probably don't want more than 3 colours, and I've got 3 colours in here already. Possibly I might go up to 5, but I really don't tend to use more than 3 on a small piece like this. But anyway, we will see. Odd numbers I think always work better, so 3 or 5 would be fine. Perhaps you could have 2 shades of green and 2 shades of red and a silver, you know. So let's have a look. Now I'm feeling that what I want to do is do a little stitch to go into the center of these, which will be like a fly or a feather stitch that will end in between these lovely sparkly stitches. So I'm going to try with this green and red. It's going to be hard to show up the colour unless you get a slight difference in colour. So I've got a couple of different reds and I've got a couple of different greens. So I think I might try a slightly different green, which is almost, it's a little bit olive. So it will show up on both of them, albeit I've probably made life harder for myself having these 3 colours all together in the centre, because yeah, I might need to end up going on to five colours. But I'm going to start this one off, and let's have a look. I just got to do a little knot in here, and we will see how we go. So I'm going to do a little stitch with a tail, fly or feather stitch. They're very similar. You could call them cousins, really. And what I might do is, actually, I might even start in the outside layer, so it will show quite well. What I'm going to do is make sure that I start on the edge of the previous stitch, especially because I'm going out a bit further. I want to make these stitches sort of noticeable. So with fly and feather stitch, they're both very similar. What you do is make almost like a V or a Y shape, depending on how long the tail is. It looks like a V or a Y. So what I'm going to do is do the stitches about the width of the edges of the stitch in the row before, if you like. So you do a stitch in like that, and then you want to catch this thread. And so I'm going to come into the middle green layer to catch that. And then I'm going to do a nice long tail towards the center, but not right into the center, but right in the middle of those two stitches. You can see, like that. And then I'm going to do the same all the way around. So what we'll get is like a little series of Y shapes around there. And then this little bit here seems to me perfect to pop a little contrasting French knot in. When I get into the middle, there's going to be a little bit of space. So I'm either going to do French knots or do a little seed stitch, maybe in a sort of whitey sort of colour, just to stand out against the green here and here. Yeah, so let's have a look and see how we get on. So those are 3 that I've got to start with, and I will do a little update video. I will try and get it for you in the week if I can, but unfortunately last week I had an absolutely mad week at the other job, so I will try and get it to you before next Sunday, but I will aim to release this this video about this time each week, so probably around 2 o'clock UK time. Okay, and yeah, I'd love to see your comments, and if you are in my group, or if you're not in my group and you want to join, I'd love to see your progress, or I'd love to see you even just cutting out and giving it a go. It's really nice to know there's somebody out there listening. So thank you very much, and I will catch up with you again next week, but I'll probably try and just quickly post a little video about the ones I made previously, so you can just look at them, so you can sort of get some ideas, and then I'll try and post a progress one a little bit later in the week. Okay, have a lovely week everyone, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Or if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, then have a lovely Monday. Okay, take care. Bye.